So, 20 brands and the item that springs to mind when I think of them, when someone says that name. Let me share them with you. Hello, and the warmest of welcomes to today's video. For those of you who haven't seen my face before, hi, I'm Nick, glad to have you here. Those who have seen my face before, thank you so much for joining me again. I hope you enjoy my videos. I put out videos roughly 3 times a week on a range of different topics anywhere from fashion, slightly more personal topics. So if that sounds like something you'd be interested in, then please do head down, hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell. I love chatting with you all. I'm all about living life loud, and what that means to me is being your authentic self, being proud to be you, and just celebrating who you are. Celebrating yourself, and of course, celebrating others. So, what are we doing? Today, I'm going to share with you the item that springs to mind in that kind of instant recall when I think of X brand. And this was inspired by, I was on TikTok and Luxe Collective, who are a consignment store in the UK. I've never bought from them, but I have had a look. They have some really cool pieces. They do this thing on their TikTok where, I think it might be part of a podcast or something, where they'll say a brand and they have to do a bit of an instant recall of what the item is that they think of. And a lot of the time, I sit there and I look at the item and I think, I hear what the item is, and I think, oh, that's not what I'd have thought of, which is really interesting because then you get on your phone, you start Googling it, you look into it, and that's always really interesting. It's how we learn and it's how we find out more about fashion. But it's interesting to think, what is that item that you find synonymous with a brand? What is the icon for you as an individual? Opposed to what they tell us their icons are, what do we actually think their icon is in terms of our instant recall? I find it really interesting. So I've got 20 brands that I've written down, and I've thought I wrote them and then wrote the instant first piece that came to mind without even going on their website or anything, and I'm just going to share those with you. I will drop them down below, so if you want to do something similar and share what your thoughts are, or in the comments you want to tell me which ones you agree with, disagree with, then I would love to hear from you. So, without further ado, let's get into it. The first brand, Longchamp, and the first item that always springs to mind when someone says Longchamp is the lait pliage, but in the long shoulder tote bag. I saw these all the time. I still see them all the time. I think it's possibly their most popular style of bag. Easy, but it's always the thing that springs to mind. And it springs to mind in the colour Burberry, which is that kind of bluey purple or grey. That tends to be what I think of when I think Longchamp. For Chanel, there are 3 things. First thing, price increase. Mainly because my timeline has been inundated with why I'm not buying from Chanel anymore, price increase videos. I mean, I remember seeing this all 6 months ago. I'm now waiting for the I bought this pre-price increase unboxing, I beat the price increase, all of those types of videos. And in 6 months, we can go through it all again. Second thing, Chanel classic flap. But equally, I also think about the Chanel tweed jackets. Don't know why, but those 2 things always pop into my mind together. I imagine someone wearing a Chanel tweed jacket with a Chanel classic flap, always in black caviar, and I always think of the jumbo size. So there we are. That's what I think of when I think Chanel. Hermes, the Birkin. I don't often think of the Kelly. I rarely think of the Constance. When someone says, name an Hermes bag, immediately I think of a Birkin. It's my favourite of the Hermes bags. Garden Party rivals it for me, which is a bit more accessible. I would definitely like to own a Garden Party, but if you said name a bag, name an Hermes piece, name something from that brand, Birkins. Alexander McQueen, I immediately think of the oversized sneaker. I remember those being all the hype when I was just getting into fashion, that kind of 2013, 14, 15 era. That was when I started looking at these types of brands, and the oversized sneaker for me from Alexander McQueen was at the forefront of what people were looking at, buying and loving. A brand full of whimsy, Moschino. I think of the biker bag whenever I think Moschino. Playful, fun, always comes out in a beautiful range of saturated colours, often in gold hardware. Something a little bit different is a signature of Moschino. It just leans into their playful aesthetic. It's instantly what I think of. And to be honest, if I were to be buying Moschino bags, it would probably be my first stop in terms of where I would go. Iconic jewelry brand Cartier. What do I think of when I think Cartier? I think of the iconic power rings from Cartier. Panthère de Cartier rings. They are absolutely beautiful. And I think of the one that is more like a cage. It's got the cutouts in it, metal with a few jewels in it, and it's looks more like a cage that's on your finger with the panther face on it, and that is exactly what I think of, which is funny because I own Cartier and I don't even think of what I own from Cartier. I instantly think of something I don't have from that particular brand, but there we are, that's what it is. Now to another favourite brand of mine, Mulberry, and I instantly think of the Heritage Bayswater. It's a classic style, it's an icon of that brand. They tell us it's an icon and I believe them, it's an icon. I own two, I absolutely love and adore them. I don't know that there are many bags from Mulberry that would spring to people's minds. Potentially the Alexa would be the only other one I could think of, but I don't know that the others are quite as iconic as the Bayswater. I think it's the one that most people know. It's also the one that most people I know who have had a Mulberry bag have owned or do own, and there's a reason for that. When someone says Gucci, I immediately think Marmont, and I don't think Marmont bags, I don't think flat bags, I don't think anything other than the belt. I imagine, and this is always in black leather with the gold GGs. That is what I think of. It is possibly one of the items that I've seen the most from Gucci be worn, particularly when I'm out in London, and it's popular for a reason. I understand it, why it was popular, but it is definitely embedded in my brain as when someone says Gucci, I immediately think that. Is it a piece I would want to own from Gucci? It isn't. I wouldn't own a Gucci belt, to be honest, but it is a icon, I would say, in the Gucci collection. Whether you love the Marmont line, hate the Marmont line, they certainly did a great job with marketing it and selling it. It was very, very popular, and I can imagine was a bit of a money spinner for the brand, so well done you, Gucci. Stella McCartney, Sustainable Stella, and I always think about the Falabella Hobo. It's got that beautiful shine to it. It's got that lovely edge with the hardware. It's a great piece. I've thought about buying a Falabella a few times, thought about buying a Falabella clutch, but it's the Falabella Hobo that always springs to mind. It is the thing that I remember seeing the most. When I've gone into the Stella McCartney store, it's the thing I'm most drawn to as well. I just feel is synonymous with that brand. Louboutin, red bottom heels, none other for me than the So Kate. I'm sure a lot of people would say the Pigalle. I think So Kate because they are tall, they are sexy, they are the shoe that I would like to own the most, they're the shoe that I think of the most. And to be honest, when I was, like I said, kind of coming into the exploration of fashion and luxury when I was sort of 17, 18, 19, it was at that point in time where a lot of people were buying the very tall Louboutins. The platforms were very popular at the time, but the So Kates were incredibly popular at the time as well. The 120 heel was definitely something that people were buying in buckets, and that's not so much the case anymore, but certainly kind of 10 or so years ago, they were incredibly popular. That was when I really started to find out more about these brands, and therefore that's why the So Kate is really stuck in my mind. And particularly going out in London, you used to see a whole lot of So Kates, particularly in black patent leather. You saw a lot of Pigalles, but I think a lot of people braved the 120s just because of the way that they elongate the leg. When it comes to Burberry, can you think of anything else other than a trench coat? And I always think of this in that beautiful kind of sand colour with that lovely checked interior. Again, hilarious because I own a Burberry trench coat in this ice blue. That is not what I think of. To be honest, I sometimes forget that I own that coat. It's terrible, isn't it? That shouldn't be the case. It's one of the items that I struggle with the most. I don't want to part with it, but I also don't want to wear it. But I think of that Are Burberry going through a little bit of a revitalization of their brand? Yes. Do I think it's the right thing to do? No. I think it's a classic brand. Leave it as such. Stop messing with it. Stop trying to modernize it. Do what you do well. And one of those things is the trench that is cemented in everybody's mind as an iconic piece, and leave it as such. So Celine, and this is a brand that I don't know anybody who says they hate, but you either really like it or I think find it a little bit meh. And I like this from a particular era, and this is why this is the piece that instantly comes to mind when you say Celine, and this is the Celine Phantom, and it's from the Phoebe Philo era. This was the piece that I was initially introduced to with Celine. It's the first piece I ever looked at from that brand, and therefore has really cemented itself in my mind. I love that winged aesthetic. I love the pieces from the Phoebe Philo era. I think it was a really successful time for the brand. And a lot of icons and a lot of it bags were produced in that period of time, and it is the one that just sticks with me. And when I think of the Celine Phantom, I always think of it in that kind of taupe colour, fully winged out, and I just think it's beautiful and sophisticated, and it was of the time, but I still love it. It's still what springs to mind, and I'm a really big fan of the Celine brand. I like it a lot. Ralph Lauren, a brand that over time I've bought from less and less, in all honesty, but the piece that always still comes to mind if someone says Ralph Lauren, I think of the polo shirts. I think of the wall of multicolour polo shirts with the contrasting logo here. I owned a lot of those over the years. I still own a fair few of them, actually. I do like Ralph Lauren, but I instantly think of the polo shirt, that kind of equestrian aesthetic. It's what I grew up wearing. It's what I grew up with all of my friends wearing as well. It was that when you wanted to feel fancy and you wanted to feel pulled together, everyone either put on a Ralph Lauren polo shirt or a Ralph Lauren shirt. And they used to call it, they'd be like, oh yeah, I'm wearing the Ralph. And it sounds really obnoxious. And when people used to say that, I used to be like, ooh. But, you know, friends used to be like, oh, we're wearing our Ralphie shirts. And you're just like, but I get it. And, you know, anything that had that kind of little polo Ralph Lauren, it was always from the polo line, never from Purple Label or any of the others. I always think when someone says Ralph Lauren, polo Ralph Lauren, and I think polo shirt, but I'm sure a lot of people would think shirts, but polo shirt for me. Valentino, and I think of the Valentino rock stud heels, and I think of these in the 105 millimeters. Is that the higher heel? 105 millimeters. And I think of them in that pinky beige with the pink caging around them. That's the variation that springs to mind when someone says Valentino. I instantly think that. The second piece I think of is then the spike bag, but definitely the rock stud initially comes to mind in that colour combination. The second colour combination I would think of would be the black high shine leather with that kind of pinky beige trim. But great shoes. I've heard great things about them. I think they were always, for a while, kind of the more expensive end, and I now think brands like Amina Muaddi have kind of made them not feel quite as expensive or quite as high end as, not as high end, or quite as extreme in terms of price point as they once were. They're beautiful. I can see why people still wear them. A lot of people say they're still outdated. I don't think so. They are what I instantly think of when someone says Valentino. Dior, how could you think of anything else other than the Lady Dior? And when I think Lady Dior, I think of black lambskin in the medium size with the champagne gold hardware. That's the variation that I personally think of whenever anybody says it. I think, wasn't that the original? I have a feeling that the mini and the smaller sizes came later from Maria Grazia Chiuri. I have a feeling. Let me know if I'm wrong, but I have that thought that the medium was the core size and then larger and smaller sizes kind of bookended it. But let me know, but I instantly think of that variation of the Lady Dior. MCM, and I love MCM. I love the edge of it. And the item that I immediately think of when someone says MCM is the Visitos tote bag. I'll put the photo in because I can't remember the exact name of it, but the print that I think of this in is the white with the multicolour monogramming on it. That's the piece that I think of. I'm sure a lot of people think about this in the cognac, as that's one of their core colours. Red is also quite popular from MCM, but the thing that I always think of is that white leather with the multicolour, and it's always in this tote bag. Again, funny, I own an MCM piece and my instant recall isn't to the pieces that I own, it is to something else. Not a bag style I'm looking to buy, but it's definitely what springs to mind. Bottega Veneta, the piece that springs to mind for me is the Mini Jodie. There's not a particular variation that I think of when it comes to this bag. That just happens to be the bag style that springs to mind. But what I tend to think of when someone says Bottega is Mini Jodie in practicality. Tricky zipper. That tends to be the thought process. Bottega, Mini Jodie, tricky zipper, impractical. Now to Versace, and the piece that I instantly think of, probably because it's the piece I want the most from that, is the bathrobe. And I always think about it in that gorgeous baby pink because I think it is absolutely stunning. I go back and forth on the colour, whether or not I want the light pink, the magenta, or the turquoise. I think the light pink would win out, but that is instantly what I think. Second piece I think of, La Medusa handbags. That tends to be my second thought, but instantly Versace bathrobe. Now to Fendi, and I'm sure that a lot of people think about the baguette because of how hyped the baguette is. Sex and the City. I've never seen In Just Like That, so I missed out on the whole resurgence of all of this because I liked Sex and the City, I watched the movies, didn't have a huge interest in watching the revival of it, because in all honesty, Samantha was my favourite character, so there we have that. But the piece that I instantly think of when someone says Fendi is the Fendi Peekaboo, but a very specific one from the Monster Collection. The Monster Collection was when I first noticed Fendi. It was when I was in Stuttgart and there was one for sale. It was a backpack that was for sale. And I first noticed that brand. Then I realised that they did it in the peekaboo, in the large size, in the top handle. That is one of my favourite Fendi styles. And the fact that you could get it in this monster is incredible. So I instantly think of the Monster Collection and the peekaboo as a specific piece. There is one for sale pre-loved at the moment that I keep going back and forth on whether I want it, because it is really fun. But it's also like £1,500. So I think my sensible head wins out and says, no. But anyway, I think Fendi, Monster Collection, Peekaboo. And last but certainly by no means least, Louis Vuitton. I always think of the Neverfull. I think it's just an icon. Yes, it is the piece that maybe I most regularly see in my day-to-day life from Louis Vuitton, but it's popular for a reason. And therefore, it is the piece that when someone says Louis Vuitton, I think Neverfull. I'm sure the brand probably wants you to think trunks, and because that's where their history is, that's where their heritage is. But in all honesty, they've created a bit of a monster for themselves because they created a bag that is so popular, that has become really saturated in the market, that people keep buying year in, year out, that people aspire to own as their day in, day out bag, travel bag, whatever it is, that it's firmly planted itself in the mind of the consumer. The Speedy would be another thought of mine, and then I would say the third thing I think of is probably the Archlight sneaker. But for me, Neverfull, classic monogram is always the one that I think of when someone says Louis Vuitton. I bought a Louis Vuitton bag, I instantly think Neverfull, regardless of what it is. But that is not a bad thing. That is not a diss. That is not something negative. That is just me as an individual where my head goes. So there we have it, everyone. That was a little bit of fun. I hope you enjoyed that. I just shared a fair few brands. Of course, there are brands I didn't share. There are some that I purposefully didn't share. There were others that I didn't share because, you know, I didn't want to sit here and do 30, 40, 50 brands. But if there are some that you would like me to do, by all means do. Or if you would like to do a variation of this video and include brands that I haven't included, then by all means, please go forth and do so. I would love to hear your thoughts on this. I would love to hear some of the items that spring to mind when you hear of these brands. Let me know what you think. Let me know what your thoughts are on this video, and I can't wait to see you in the next one. Take care, everyone. Bye now. Mwah.